Hi, Maria. Shehnaz here. So Maria and I, we have been doing these conversations where we are exchanging information about health, spirituality, evolution, expanding consciousness. And today I impromptu chose the subject blood, thinking that that's what Maria does. That's her pretty much bread and butter comes from that work of being under microscope, looking at the blood and looking at the healthy blood, looking at the unhealthy blood, and knowing how to discern that, because that's what you have done, right? So, Maria, please tell everyone that how did you come to that understanding and what you had to go through to become the expert looking at the blood under the microscope?
Yeah, so it was actually it wasn't easy. So a clinical laboratory scientist is my bachelor degree, and you don't get out of that without very detailed, very aggressive internship. So my training was actually in Colorado Springs, and in order to, there are different areas of a pathological laboratory. And when you go into this field, you can go into forensics, you can go into cytology, you can go into, tissue, where you're looking at, what's it called? Frozens, after someone goes in and they have surgery and the surgeon is cutting margins, and histology. Thank you. So histology, you can go into histology, but in a pathology lab, there are different areas. In big cities, you're usually specialized. So right out of training from Colorado Springs, I actually was hired on by the Mayo Clinic and in Rochester, Minnesota. So I graduated top of my class, and you have to test out of the different areas in the path lab. So all of my tests were both written and oral. And the actual internship was 12 months unpaid, full-time, for 12 months.
Wow.
So it's not easy. This is not a nursing degree. This is not, just a regular science degree. No, you're talking about oral and written exams just to take your next step, within the laboratory. So I had to go through immunology. So if you can imagine this level of immunology in a verbal, having to verbally regurgitate some of this information was very difficult. But mind you, this was like over 20 years ago. So obviously there's a lot of things that I've forgotten. Even some things with the blood cells. So, we bring up blood, there are so many things that we can see, so many things. And it also matters the complexity and the strength of your microscope, which I'll tell you guys, I remember working, oh my God. So I remember, out of training, and I remember working just trying to help someone in an office, and I saw a bug, and I thought, God, this thing looks like, what is this? This is like a mite. I would do that. I was that person. I would put mites under the microscope and look at their legs and all their hair,
I think I would do the same thing if I have a microscope.
For sure.
Right? Because it's kind of curiosity, and it's kind of fun because, everything that when you really look at it under the microscope, it looks almost like you are in this, like it looks pretty creepy in a way, right? Because you get to see all that. But I wanted to start with this whole thing is that life is in the blood, right? That's what Bible says. And that's what we all know, because life is truly in the blood. And blood is our major gauge for whether we are healthy or whether we are diseased. And one drop of blood, actually one drop of blood, you can recreate clone, right? Or
one cell. One cell within one drop, right?
One cell within one drop. Okay.
So people don't know this, but have you heard of a company called CloneAid?
Actually, I haven't, but go ahead and elaborate.
So people can go back and research, and if they really want to know why Martha Stewart went to jail way back in the 90s, start looking up CloneAid, CLO-NAID, CloneAid.
Okay.
And this has been around for a long time, and they will even tell you on their website, like they can take a cell or just a piece of tissue from your stomach, or just one stomach cell, and recreate life. So I always laugh when people think that, that stopped with Dolly the sheep.
Right, because of course it didn't. And,
Yeah.
that's just the way with everything, right? Because,
Yeah.
mainstream, there's a narrative that they want everybody to have, and there's a truth that's happening in parallel. But I want you to explain why you said that Martha Stewart and Clonade. What's the connection there?
Because it was insider trading.
Oh.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly what she did, because I didn't frankly care enough to go all the way down that rabbit hole. But it was about Clonade, and it wasn't supposed to be public. People weren't supposed to really know that existed, except for, unless you were one of the so-called, I don't even like saying the word elite, because they're really not elite to me. I should say the puppet masters.
That is true. They are,
Yeah, because I'd rather be derogatory about it, to be honest with you, because we're not the bottom feeders that they think we are.
I think that the more elite you think that you are, the more enslaved you are, because in order to get sometimes to that status, you have to sell certain things along the way. And then you kind of do give up your freedom, right? And it's kind of interesting because the whole thing about the free will, which we will have to cover in some other day, because that is a very interesting thing, because free will is truly like how much freedom you have and how much you're availing your free will is an interesting thing, depending on how enslaved you are, or how free you think you are, or how enslaved you are. You know what I mean? Like, it just gets.
I do. And it's not only a consciousness, but it's a vibration, right? It's a frequency. So if you are, at that level of puppet mastery,
That is true.
peasants, then what hormonally and chemically is your body doing? Do you constantly live in fear? Are you always looking over your shoulder? What's it going to look like in your blood? So if I had, all I have is I have a research microscope. I would love, more like an electron microscope, excuse me, so that I could actually see there are stains out there, and there are tests that you can do on the cells themselves where you can see their aura, because you can see their electrical charge. So I can't see that, with the microscope that I have, but you can look those pictures up, obviously. I mean, there's so much research that people can do. But how cool would that be? Because you have to know, I mean, if this is your existence, then your vibration isn't going to be, in your frequency of your cells is not going to be nearly what mine is. There's just no way. Or yours.
Right. So you're saying, that the aura, for example, like there's a different type of microscope where you can actually see the aura by looking at the blood?
I call it aura because you can actually, so put it this way. There are microscopes that are more than strong enough. I would probably only need like a 1-level upgrade, to be honest with you, to see this. But you can see cancer, you can see morphology and changes within the blood itself, not just a cell, but like the plasma of the blood, that the cells are swimming through, like you can see, or the interstitial fluid, you can actually see certain changes take place within and around the cells. So you could diagnose cancer without using, any radiation whatsoever, because you can see it coming long before it ever actually happens, based on changes within the interstitial fluid, the microbes, and the little creatures that live symbiotically with us in our bodies. You can actually start to see those, and there's a good solid relationship that we keep that's supposed to be like this. And when that starts to get further and further apart, where you're, I don't want to say necessarily just acidic, but your diet is poor, your nutrition is poor, your vibration is low, you live in fear, chemically, what happens? What happens to people who are constantly stressed out? Dis-ease, right?
Exactly.
So, and you can see it. Yeah. So you can start to see these changes under the microscope.
And technically, if you're not feeling well, then you can actually maybe get your blood to be seen. So like, let's say if I want my blood to be checked, then right now, in the way the infrastructure we have, the current infrastructure, is there like a way I can convince someone to look my blood under microscope to gauge whether I'm going to have a cancer? Like, is there like a parameter that I can
Yeah,
ask to
so
be looked at?
I'll tell people, and I'll tell you, this is how it typically works. So in a typical hospital, so you'll walk in and you'll get your blood taken, right? Because not just anybody can do this. There are very few of us that are true CLS, degreed people. So you've got medical technologists, you've got medical laboratory technicians, you've got machines that do most of the work. There are very few specialized people that are really strong microscopically, and that's just a fact. Because anymore, what the schools will put out is maybe a 2-year degree person who isn't used to seeing the level of pathology that maybe a CLS would see. So when you come into the hospital and you get your blood drawn, literally what's done is it's put through a machine. Now, here's the hard part, and this is actually pretty interesting. The machine will take an average reading of the size of a cell. So you have an average size that we know that a red cell is supposed to be, with an average amount of hemoglobin, with an average amount of iron, and the machines are very, very smart, and they can read these things just based on size and based on what's inside of them. They can tell you if there's, say, a reticulocyte, like a very young red blood cell that came out of the bone marrow way too quickly. So there are different types of hematology machines, for instance, like flow cytometers, and they can do all of these different tests. But let's say you have a microcytic anemia and like maybe a macrocytic anemia. So this is something else that people don't realize. There are all kinds of different anemias, all kinds. It's not just my cells are small or I don't have enough iron. No way. There's a lot of different types of anemia. Like you can have, really large cells, and that's a macrocytic anemia. And that's due to, a nutritional deficiency, a very bad nutritional deficiency, actually. But so these things get put through a machine, right? And the machine knows an average size. But if on average, the sizes of these two cells, like small and big, come out to the average of a regular red cell, it's not going to flag as abnormal.
Oh,
so the
wow.
only way it's going to trigger a manual, what we call a differential, is if the machine flags it as abnormal. Or what about this? What about if you have a group of platelets that seem to be clumping or sticking together? Well, you're supposed to have a couple 100,000 platelets. Okay, but if they're kind of clumping or sticking together, so maybe, it's cold outside and you have some sort of like an agglutination, where, cells get kind of slower and sticky a little bit, or let's say you're full of heavy metals and you lose your electrical charge. Guess what? Those machine readings are not going to be accurate, because it might group a group of platelets and call it something different because it's grouped together, right, by size. So they look at, and they're getting smarter, the machines are getting smarter, to where they can tell the difference between these things. But it, just so people know, it's not a perfect science unless you're actually looking under the microscope with a trained eye.
Wow. So, okay. So let's pause here. So there were two things you said. One, you said that the way the machine does, because it's like machine and human being, we have something in common. Like it's a data comparison. Like you're saying, it's a relativity, right? It's a relativity, yeah. It's a differential. Like, so when the difference, it's almost like, if there's a small line and then you draw another large line, then you can see the other line is very small because of the size difference. But if there's a one line here and you draw another line that's the same size, then there's no difference. So depending on how it perceives the information, it translates the information according to that.
Yeah, because it'll total it, and it'll take this average. But if your average comes out, to look good, like if you have a lot of cells that are macrocytic or they're too large, your red blood cells, it'll flag for sure. And there's all of these different parameters, like, okay, so for instance, red cell distribution width, RDW. What that means is when we put something through an analyzer, it is supposed to have a specific amount of space in between the cells. If that red blood cell distribution width is too large or too small, then we have Houston, we have a problem. So this should flag, a differential. But wait a minute, here's another problem. A lot of people and I know because I taught college. Okay, so I know this to be a fact that not every eye is created equal. So you also run the risk of subjective poor analysis.
Right, exactly, because there's biases comes in. Let's say if the technician is having a bad day and they're doing the job just because they have to be there, they have not even slept for days or whatever their story
Yes,
is,
whatever it is.
wherever they are, in which space in mind. And if you really think about it, so what you're actually saying, so there are many things you're saying, but one of them that's very important for everybody who's listening to this conversation to take it from is that, the blood report alone is not written in the stone. And even the very fact that with my whole ordeal that I went through, remember, where the blood report, even though blood report wasn't the only thing, it was the doctor's interpretation of the blood report.
I carved your report up. I did. If you remember, I really analyzed that every parameter of your report.
Yeah. And it was interesting that how you did not come to the same conclusion as they did. And they sent me on this big giant trip to kind of decipher what that meant. And it was a 6 weeks ordeal. But coming back to this, so I think the blood report alone, because there are so many variables and who's translating the information, can not necessarily should be the only gauge for people to get concerned about their health diagnosis. And secondly, what you said, which was very interesting, is that let's say if there's anemia, which generally people always connect anemia with the lack of iron because that's the very common cause of it, but that doesn't mean that that's the only cause, because there are so many reasons you can have anemia, just like everything and anything and everything, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to get to the root cause, and root cause, it could be that ultimately, when you figure it out, it's going to be something way more, it's going to be in a patternistic behavior of yours.
Yeah. And something else that people need to realize, I just want to show people how difficult this is. Okay. And you expect a laboratorian to have a trained eye. So this is just some of the cycles, right? And this is 2 pages of, a 300-page book full of illustrations like this, where, we will have to, I'm just saying, respect the process, because it's definitely not easy. But Western medicine has made a way to make it efficient, but in my opinion, much less diagnostic. Let's put it that way, because you cannot beat a trained eye. And I'll tell you a quick, 2-minute story. When I was first out of training, okay, brand new, and I think I might have told the story before, it was pretty hysterical. Keep in mind that my training was, 20 some years ago. I had very fresh eyes, right? And so I'm a sponge, just like you, coming out of your engineering school, like you're going to California, you're like, I'm going to kick everybody's ass and I'm going to be the best. And, it doesn't even matter if I'm new or young, or I don't speak English, or, for me, if I'm an introvert because I don't like quilting, I don't want to go talk about your quilts, or, you know what I mean? So I just I wasn't a get along with everybody type of person, in my profession, because I was very much like a sponge. So I just didn't care. I'd go read a newspaper at lunch because I didn't want to hear about dumb stories.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So that was me. So I'm sure that you were much the same way. Don't bother me with this stuff. I'm not here to socialize, man. I want to learn.
Exactly. I'm always it's so much fun, right? Having to be on that quest. Like you said, that when you look at the bug and you want to put it under the microscope, even though that's not part of your training or part of your, path, but you're like, what the hell, man? I have this device and I have this bug and I want to see it under the microscope.
This son of a bitch is hairy. This is amazing. This is gross. I don't want this on me. But so you start doing things, right? And you start having fun with your education, which is when I knew that I was right where I belonged. So I had this situation, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, especially when you start a new profession, you don't want to make a mistake. So you have, a pathologist over you, and this is how my career really it really became a lot different than it was for most. So I got hired on at Mayo Clinic. I actually left because their taxes were too high in Minnesota, and I was a single mom. And that was the main reason and they wanted me in the polymerase chain reaction section. Like I said, I was like top of my class, and they wanted me to specialize in the PCR, but the electrophoresis testing. So for specialty coagulation tests. And I would have been bored out of my mind. I'm like, seriously, I'm not going to do this all day, every day, because screw this. I mean, I need a little bit of human interaction. I'm smarter than this. I don't, I mean, no, I don't want to do it. So I actually didn't do it. And I went to Wyoming, where I knew that I would have to work in every single position that I was trained in, because you're not departmentalized. One of my first jobs, well, it was actually my second job, I believe, but no, it was my first. So I'm looking under the microscope, and I'm a new tech, and I'm like, and I'm young, and I see these cells, and well, actually what happened was the other techs saw them and they didn't know what the hell they were. They called them, oh, that's a referocyte. That means it gets referred somewhere else, because we don't know what the hell this is. And I'm like, well, do you want me to look at it? Well, if we don't know, you're not going to know. I mean, we're seasoned, we're veterans. And I thought, oh, well, how about if I just take a look anyway?
Right.
Because I think you're wrong about what I don't know. So I looked under the microscope, and I said, this is a hairy cell. This person has hairy cell leukemia. And they're like, what the hell is that? What do you mean a hairy cell? Like, that exists? But see, here's the thing, is that this is the difference in, and I'm not like trying to toot my own horn. I'm telling you that and just like in your profession, you have different degrees of, training, and, people who are actually love what they do and are interested in it and want to tie this loose end to this. And I always wanted to tie up the ends, and I would always look for the diagnoses and the pathology that went with it, so that I could recognize anything under the microscope.
Right.
And that's what I did. That's how I trained myself. So they sent it away. And of course, they told the lead pathologist, well, what Maria said, and, trying to make a joke about it. So the next morning, he comes in and he calls a great big meeting. And there's like, 20 people in the room. And I'm like, what the hell's this about? And I'm, keep in mind, I'm very young. And he says, I want to know who said this. Who in God's name called this a hairy cell? And I thought, oh shit, was I wrong? I mean, I stepped forward and I said, I did. Right. I mean, it's a hairy cell. And he's like, well, you're the only one that knows what you're doing. So you're my right hand.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good. So that's amazing.
Right. So I spent a lot of time training different, like tissues, and my training in Colorado Springs was also under cytology. So I actually had time with surgery and bone marrow and different, just very, virology, which really it was bullshit, to be honest. Nothing ever grew. And of course it wouldn't, because you can't can't grow something that doesn't really exist. So, I mean, it was, but I made a lot of blood products, and people don't understand what goes into that either. Like, okay, have you heard of fresh frozen plasma? Have you heard of that? Fresh frozen plasma. So your plasma has, you can separate your red blood cells. You know how you go to get your blood drawn and they spin it in a centrifuge, and what's left on top is your plasma.
Right. And your red cells. I have a picture, by the way. So actually take a little pause. Okay, so you shared your story that even when you were very, very young, and you were able to see the blood and recognize what the blood was for, because you have that is your passion, and you really love what you're doing and what you've learned, and your curiosity, and you were top of the class. So I think all of that has made you the right person to do what you have been doing. And I think you were talking about plasma. So I'm actually going to share my screen because I have a picture that I believe would be a good way to get everybody to understand what the blood is, right? So I'm going to just get a picture here. And so right here in this picture, I just got this picture and I'm hoping that this is doing a good job of representing what you were saying. So go ahead, Maria. You were talking about.
Yeah, so you've got when you go and you have your blood work done, it's not, guys, it's not the red blood cells that are getting tested, for different things. It's actually your plasma. Machines will, you put your tubes in, they're labeled and through barcode. It's actually very sophisticated. And the machine will come through and take a little drop, off the top, like microliters, okay? Just a tiny little bit. And they'll take a little bit of that off the top and it'll put, your blood through all kinds of different tests. One machine might sample your blood 20 different times in, one pass. It's actually very sophisticated, and then run, an internal test on it. So Shehnaz has a really good diagram here, and that plasma is actually what we're testing, basically for the proteins, is what we're looking at, not the actual. I guess I'd say the cells we're testing for, protein contents. So yeah, and then you see your platelets right there. So the average person has about 200 to 400,000 platelets, circulating at one time. And then same thing with like your white blood cells, you might have between 5 and 10,000. So, when you live at higher elevations, you'll have even more, because your body compensates, starts spitting more cells out of your bone marrow, and your body compensates for elevation and starts to produce more so that you are oxygenated. It's actually, your body is a smart body, and it will work always to protect and defend itself and adjust to, the environment. It's actually pretty cool.
Right. And what you just said is something that everybody needs to keep in mind, because, because we have this built-in intelligence system, right? Like we can technically, so I want to actually take a little journey here, right? So the very fact that we have white blood cells and red blood cells within the blood, but based on whatever research I've done, and please, Maria, correct me because you are the expert here, but white blood cell is a eukaryotic cell. And red blood cells are usually eukaryotic cell in the beginning of the life, but then ultimately it looks like as the maturity happens, it kind of doesn't retain that, which is why the DNA is within the white blood cells and not in the red blood cells. Am I saying it right?
Well, no, because so for instance, when I am looking at telomeres, I'll actually look at the white blood cells. So that's where I look at like telomere length. That's where that testing is done from, is your white cells. But you can do it. I mean, you can get your DNA from either.
Okay, so when I was looking at the research, it said something about red blood cells loses their nucleus and other organelles on maturation. So what is that?
Yeah, so but consider what maturation means. So, when it comes out of, it's supposed to be mature when it comes out of the bone marrow. Sometimes that's not always the case. And then for maturation, does that mean at the life cycle, when the life cycle ends at 120 days and it goes into the spleen? I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question, like where it starts and where it begins.
Right. So I think that was my curiosity, because when I was wanting to make sure that I understand the DNA, the white blood cell is what was used to kind of show the relationship, right, with the DNA.
Right.
And my question to you is that does red blood cell, does it also contain a DNA within it?
It has to. Does it not? I mean, that's a good question. I would assume that yes, it does.
And that is what got me a little bit thinking, because the way it was explained was that is not the same as white blood cells, which is why white blood cell has all this information. So yeah, I think that maybe it would be good for us to kind of
super
do
interesting.
research
Yeah,
on it and figure it out.
because, well, the specialty tests that like, you know, that we've done or that I've received, even from specialty laboratories like SpectraCell, we're always incubating the white blood cells, always, and then pulling the bulk of the information from the white blood cells. So that's where we're pulling information about the telomeres, the centromeres, the telomeres. Then there are different types of white blood cells as well. So there's 5 different types, and then you've also got like 15 even more different immune cells. So I mean, it's quite complex. Blood is quite complex.
That's what it seems like, and I think that whatever article I was reading, it said that red blood cells are also eukaryotic cell, because they do begin their life with full complement of organelles, including nucleus and mitochondria and all of that, but it loses all of that on maturation. And it apparently looks like the definition of maturation is something that I don't know. So that may be where the answer lies of the story and how it unfolds.
Well, that's where even I'm confused, because does maturation by definition mean, at the end of its mature life cycle? Or is that, because just so everybody knows, your red blood cells are only supposed to be in circulation for 120 days. Over that time, your oxygen gets depleted and replaced, with iron. So when we donate blood, for instance, what you're donating and what someone is receiving, they're not receiving oxygenated blood, just so you know. That's coming from a vein.
Wow.
Okay. But when it comes from a vein, and people don't realize this, you're not replacing someone's oxygen per se, like they're barely getting, any, because this is coming from a vein. It's where, it comes back up, and your blood actually does this exchange where it gets reoxygenated. So, venous blood does not carry oxygen like arterial blood. And we don't donate from our arteries, we donate from our veins. So when you donate, you're replacing volume for someone. For the most part, they will get a little bit of a bump, like a little bit of additional, oxygen, which is why, they sometimes will do, the blood transfusions. But for the most part, it's really just to replace volume. And people probably don't understand that either. Right. Yeah. But yeah, just a fun fact. It's a common, obviously, within our field, but a lot of people don't necessarily think about it like that.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of interesting, that how all of this unfolds. But I wanted to highlight the fact, right, that when you really look inside the white blood cell, and then you see that there is a cell, there's a nucleus, and there's a chromosome that is what's connected with ultimately the DNA base pair, right? So that is all connected as part of the telomere here, and that's kind of all together. And that's why it gets so confusing when you hear all these different words, and then when you look at this picture where you can at least connect the dot with where the chromosome is, where the telomere is. Yeah, so go ahead.
This is super interesting. Leave this diagram up, and I want to tell something to people really quick, because unless they saw me on Sasha's program, they probably don't know this or understand. Look at the telomeres there. So your DNA has these end caps on them, okay? And these are your telomeres. And let's say you cut yourself or you have surgery, that is, your cells actually have to divide to repair, if that makes sense. So every time your cells divide, those telomeres get a little bit shorter. Does that make sense? It's every single time they divide. So anytime your body comes in and let's say you have a paper cut, and your skin cells are healing themselves from the paper cut. They're dividing. Mm-hmm. They're dividing, and it's called healing by primary intention, and they're healing a wound from the inside out. That's actually how that's how I reverse aging, because I work to provide micronutrients to blood. And it protects your telomeres from over proliferating or getting shorter. So, there's a very fine line. You want your cells to divide and break down. You want them to have autophagy, which is programmed cell death, so that they don't over proliferate and become cancer cells. It's a very unique relationship, because you want cell death, but you also want your telomeres to be, nice and long and protected, like they were when, say, you were 10 or 20.
Right,
But
because isn't that the reason the telomere is how, the gauge, that's directly related to an aging,
to
right?
biological age. That's exactly right. So you can predict someone's, that's why we talk about what is your chronological age and what is your biological age. I can tell you that my biological age is at least 10 years younger than I'm 51. But my biological age is going to be around 41.
So is that based on when you look at your blood under the microscope and you look at the telomere? Is that how you are gauging that, or what's your way of saying that?
So I would actually have to send my my blood off to a specialty lab so that they could look at the telomere length, which I believe now is done through a polymerase chain reaction, or like an electrophoresis type of a test, which you can't do unless you have a nice specialty laboratory. It's a very complex test. It takes what they do is they take white blood cells and will regrow them. I've had my telomeres tested before. People who have used my product, my anti-aging product, have actually had their telomeres tested for me as well, so that I had comparisons. And it is real and true, and you can protect yourself. But see, guys, that's protecting yourself from EMF, trying to stay active, not being sedentary, having good microcirculation, all kinds of different things that go, lessen your stress. And I'll tell you, and Shehnaz knows this too, that nutritionally, sugar will break those down lickety split like anything. So beware.
And I think that is my ultimate goal, right? Is that with understanding the biology of human being, and also understanding that how we can change the biology through your, spiritual practice, and through all the different things that you can do, and being healthy, being aware of the fact life is in the blood. So you want to make sure your blood is always doing what it needs to do, right? So it can keep your body running properly. All of that is encompassing, and it's very beautiful. And it's very beautiful.
It's very complex.
Yeah, it's very complex, because when I look at all this, and the thing is that we keep on understanding this, and right now, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we probably didn't have this explanation anywhere to be found in such a intricate way.
You know how I learned? It's disgusting. You know how I learned is way back when, is that I had to memorize, which absolutely sucked, because like even your base pairs that you have here, the DNA of the double helix,
right?
When you're young and you're training and you're learning, anatomy, physiology, and all this garbage, it's, T equals A and C equals G, because this is how your base pairs go together. But, I think that the education system does such a piss poor job of, really teaching the broad picture. And this is why you need to know this. So, as an instructor, this is the whole big picture. And this is why this is important. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because we were just taught to memorize.
I have the exact same challenge, by the way. And since we're talking about it, let's just bring it up. But the whole thing about education system, and I come from mostly in my education from third world country, and it was all based on memorization. And for whatever reason, at the time, I wanted to just do my best. So of course I had mastered my memorization, and I was really good at it, which is why I became a valedictorian. But at the end of the day, I was like, when I came to America, and then I actually, we don't have multiple choice question over there. So it's very different. It's an annual system, only one shot you get. And if you're sick that day, then tough luck, and you can fail the class. It's your problem. So it's a very brutal system. So when I came to America and I see multiple choice, I'm like, holy shit, this is so, you always have an opportunity to pass, even if you don't know anything, because it's a probability now, right? Because you can pick an answer that can be right, and then you can pass it even though you don't know the answer. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. But to me, I always feel like that now, with everything that I've done in my life, and I understand everything, which is why I feel good about it, But I wish that they would teach that in the school, right? And that's why the school system really needs a big upgrade, because if they teach biology where they can explain that how, if you understand this, then maybe you can take care of your body really well.
Yeah.
Then that would make it so much easier to even convince a child to eat a vegetable and not eat Pop-Tarts all the time for breakfast or whatever they eat. I mean, you know,
the stuff that I grew up on. I know it's horrible. It's devastating for, you know, a growing child. And same thing with like your environmental toxins, you know, your EMF exposure, just all kinds of stuff. You know, it bothers me, and I'm just going to bring this up really quick because if we're talking about blood, people don't understand what radiation damage can do to a cell. You have to, I mean, it will break your cells down. They will no longer be round. You'll get these helmet cells or these rigid, you know, borders around, because they look like they've had radiation damage under the microscope. Can you imagine now understand that children are much, much more prone to this devastating exposure and having negative effects from it, you know, because of their age. They're much more prone to damage. And can you imagine what children are going through in today's day and age, where they don't hand them a book, they hand them a computer or an iPad. For every student in every school, they have 5G towers, you know, around their schools, and then they have their classrooms, you know, full of wireless devices. They're absolutely under assault, and they're on their phones all day, every day. Actually, I bet you I could look at any kids under the microscope and couldn't find a normal one. I bet you.
Right. And actually, I think that there was a school locally here in where I live, where the school was close to they were planning on putting 5G tower close to the school, and they had a protest going on. And finally, thankfully, like they were able to, like the whole,
really?
They were able to convince them not to do it. So what I'm saying is that was a good, happy ending. But at the end of the day, you know, ultimately, because my entire surrounding right now is all 5G. And speaking of 5G, by the way, because I actually learned by talking to David Sarita, and I have a video on it if anybody's interested. But I actually learned that there's a way for us, because, you know, they keep on upgrading the smart meter that we have in our right by our houses. And David was explaining to me that how there's a way you can actually do it. You can have to create something on your own to cover it so that it doesn't go to your house, but it still gives them the information that they need for them to receive, right? Because they want to know how much to charge you for your utility bill or whatever. So it's a method to the madness. But anyway, so yeah, I have all that information in one of the video I did with David, and you should look it up. It's really fun. It's really fun. So coming back to the blood. So I guess I wanted to actually share this. Let me see if I can get back to that. Yeah, so the DNA is such an intriguing thing, so we're going to have to do that separately. But I think what you were saying is that while you were going to the school, you have to pretty much memorize everything, is what you were saying. And then the very fact is that it's kind of like, you know, it's a constant evolution, right? In terms of what they're understanding about DNA, what they're understanding about mitochondria, what they're understanding about blood. So it's a constant thing. But one thing that everybody should take from whatever we have talked so far is that life is truly in the blood. So there's a way to gauge your health through the blood. However, you can also change how your blood is if you are conscious about it. If you even know that you are not feeling good, right? You can change your diet, you can change your lifestyle, you can change your thoughts, you can change your beliefs, you can change any parameter, and then it will ultimately affect how your blood flows within your body.
It's true. Stress will affect it, especially your diet. So if people become more conscious of, and this is just so you know, I talked to a woman from Poland this weekend, and she said, my 90-year-old mom is healthier than I am in Poland. And she said, I've been in the United States for about 20 years. And she's like, I am so sick. I can't believe how sick I am. Your food here is horrible. Like you know, the options are so limited as far as, you know, having good non-poison food. And I said to her, you couldn't be more spot on, correct? Our soil has been purposely mutilated. Our animals, our crops. And the American public, even though some really horrific things have happened around the world, the American public has been a victim of eugenics testing for probably 100 years, maybe more, and not even knowing it. It's actually really sad, and a lot of people are really sick, you know. And if you think about, guys, if you just think about that, you know, water is life, blood is life, food is medicine, frequency is medicine, you will pull yourself out from the depths. Really, it's true and it's real. And I believe that in the next 5 years, that if doctors' offices don't wake up and they become more of a functional medicine type of a group, like you were asking, where can I go to get a blood test like this, where I can actually see? It takes a trained eye, a very experienced functional medicine type of practitioner, doctor, because that's specialty training, you know, under the microscope. They're not trained coming out as MDs like this. They're trained Rockefeller medicine, which is allopathy pharmaceutical, right? So this disease, here's what we have to treat it. Well, of course you do, because you're the one that caused it. Of course you have an answer for it, a-holes. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, like it's super interesting. I mean, I'm excited to talk about blood. I'm glad you picked it as a subject. But if, you know, people realized, you know, that everything that you put into your mouth has an effect. We were talking earlier, I had an upset stomach, and I'm like, I know that a Coke would fix it, you know, temporarily. It would make my pancreas just ticked at me, you know, for doing it. But, you know, so I always tell people, moderation is key.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to change and adapt, just like you said before.
Right. And if you're drinking Coke because you want to clean your drainage, because Coke truly does work. I mean, when you put it on your garbage disposal, you can see how acidic it is, how it truly works. So it's actually pretty horrific. And if you really see that, then you're not going to drink Coke every day. But the point is, like, actually consciously, like, I have drank Coke like maybe a few times
for relief,
for the very reason that you mentioned, that I actually know, like, I'm very aware that if I drink Coke right now, plus I do love the taste, but the point is when I'm doing it strategically, thinking that, okay, it's going to help me with my drainage system, I actually enjoy it. And I also say that this is actually needed for me right now to clean up, and I welcome it. And, you know, it's almost like you kind of put that spin on it, that it's actually being done for the right reason, and it does the job, right? So why not? So that is the thing, that you should use everything around you. Exactly. Moderation, and know why you're using it, know the intention behind it, and then you'll do it. So for the sake of this, because I know that we can talk on blood for much longer than this, we're going to wrap it down right now, and we'll come back with other subjects. But I would like to put it out there for other people who are listening to this conversation, that if they have any specific questions, especially regarding the blood, then please do write about it, because, you know, that's your expertise, Maria, and we would welcome questions on that subject. Also, while people are listening to us talking about all these different things, if they have any suggestion on the topic that would help them with their health journey or with their evolution journey, then please write that as well. And because we just come up with topics impromptu, and we talk about it, because we would do this probably even among ourselves, but we record it and distribute it to others. So if anybody can benefit by listening to us, then
that's true.
More the merrier.
Yeah. You keep in mind, you know, just for the audience, we're not physicians. We're not going to be able to diagnose you. We can say that we've been there, done that in many ways for many reasons. So just think of us as friends, and you know, a couple of people that, you know, we have these different experiences. So we're more than happy to bring up different subjects. I mean, I do it all day, every day. I help people all day, every day, as do you, both spiritually and, you know, as far as health is concerned. And I think right now it's good for people, you know, to be able to reach out and feel like they have community. I see it online a lot. So yeah, we're more than happy to discuss whatever, and we might not be the experts in everything, but boy, we have some good ideas.
We definitely know a little bit about everything, which is the reason we're doing this, because we're able to connect the dots. And one thing that I would leave everyone with the blood, because life is in the blood, but blood is actually where the photonic absorption occurs. And that's why when I teach the light body activation class, my whole intention with that is that if you can really make sure that your flow, your blood flow is going in all different part of your body, which means your light is going in all different part of your body, which means that you are one with everything around you, creating the toric field that you do create regardless, but you're making a beautiful sacred geometry. And that's the goal, that if everybody starts taking ownership of their body and of their health and of their blood and how healthy it is, then they are all emitting the maximum light, and they're affecting everybody that comes into contact with them. And that's how we create heaven on earth.
That's true. But people don't realize that it's you can affect the person sitting next to you.
100%.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because that is the thing, that there's an intersection going on with our electromagnetic field at all times, and not just with people, with places, with crystal, with whatever you have around your house. Everything is affecting everything. So that's why when you become very conscious about how you want to live and what environment you want to create, that's how you make the magic happen. And it's not really magic, it's actually science, as I said, because
yes, it is.
Because we're all moving molecules at the end of the day. So
100%, I agree. I just told somebody that today. I said, we're not only are we electromagnetic, but spirituality is directly connected with science, and it's that is your blood, right? Photonic absorption. I mean, it's all connected. It's very cool, and it's super fun. I'm actually glad, Shehnaz, that I woke up one day and I thought, thank God this is not as good as it gets.
Yes,
what a relief.
You can make it better. That's why you can change anything you have. You can even change your blood, by the way, with your thoughts. Ultimately, that's
epigenetics,
right?
Yep.
So at the end of the day, you do have all the power, no matter what your blood says, even. But if you know what your blood says, then maybe you can use the power to make your blood to say the right storytelling, right? So that you can be more healthy. And that's the ultimate goal, is that you have to be healthy while you're here, so you can make the most of your life.
Yes, I agree.
So, anyways, have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will come back again when we get another opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye.